Yo, what's up everyone? In today's video, I'm just going to be making a tier list going over the new Loomians. And so this is just going to be sort of like just ranking them based on how viable I think they will be. And yeah, before I get into it, just make sure to hit that subscribe button, like the video, see more videos coming soon, and yeah. So I guess the first thing I'm gonna rank is Snaggoob, and I feel like this thing would either be A minus or A tier. Um, it's such a strong breaker because I believe only like 5 Loomians resist both of its stabs. But the thing is with Snaggoob is that it has Barter and poison too. But it has immunized barter, so it can use that to cripple things that would normally be good counters to it, like Tyrex or Himper or even Isowill. And barter, I think it's currently the best set on it right now. Poison is still really good, but barter lets you steal amulet from Tyrex. Um, Even like Dyborg, I don't think people don't really use that too much, but it's still nice to have, just in case you do end up finding one. So with barter, your only true counter is Stratosaur, and even with Stratosaur existing, first off, it isn't that common, and secondly, Snaggoob isn't necessarily hard walled by it. Well, it probably is, but I think that Snaggoob is still going to be able to potentially break through Stratosaur, um, even if it does have to face one, just because Provoke is such a good tool in preventing recovery from walls. And that's what it's basically a better Gobademic that's 1.5 times stronger, and it just really smashes stall. Even I would say even offensive teams kind of struggle with it just because of how much damage it does and the the coverage it has. So yeah, that's the sort of pros of it. I guess some of the um, bad things about it would be that it is very frail. So you will have some sort of problems getting on the field, but it does have some pretty easy entry points through its quadruple brawler resistance, bug resistance, so like Swolder, and it also has an earthquake immunity. Not to mention, it also has poison guard removal, so that gives it some more defensive utility too. So yeah, I feel like overall Snaggoob it's a great Loomian in the meta. Between A and A minus, I think I'll keep it in A for now, just because of how threatening it is offensively. So yeah, on to the next thing. I'll go over Kinibo, and I think that Kinibo is sort of in the same boat as Snaggoob, either A minus or A tier. I'll just keep it in A tier for now. And so what Kinibo does is it's a water brawler type, and water and brawler is great offensively. Only a couple things resist it, and those things it has raging tackle, so it's able to hit them really hard. And on top of that, it has two great abilities. One is Madcap, which boosts the damage of recoil moves, which I don't think is as useful as its other ability, but it's still something noteworthy. And the second ability, which is far more, much better, in my opinion, is Ambush. And so Kinibo, it has a base 125 attack stat, which is about the same as Dual Tooth. But unlike Joltooth, its speed tier is great. It has base 80 speed, which allows it to outspeed some pretty threatening things like Valkyrie. And because you're able to threaten so much with your stabs alone, you're able to force so many swap outs. And with that, you're able to get a huge hit on anything. And the thing with Kanibo is it doesn't necessarily have a true counter to it. Everything that could switch in can die to it, but it is held back by the fact that there's a lot of things that can check it. Like like just one on one, it isn't too threatening against some things. But if you're able to force that switch, it can do a lot of damage, especially with driving force. And driving force, it's in my opinion, it's a great move on it because you're able to do tons of damage to whatever comes in, force them out, and potentially make them switch out again. So you just keep on piling on the damage, and that's definitely very useful and just spreading so much damage with this thing because it wall breaks insanely easily. And yeah, some of the downsides to it, its defensive utility is quite lacking. It's weak to some pretty common moves. Like it has a quadruple weakness to toxic. It's weak to electric. Both of those are very common. It's weak to air, which is probably going to be used a bit more now, especially with Snaggoob. It's also weak to plant. So yeah, it has a pretty large amount of weaknesses. But despite all of those, I think it's going to be a solid A tier just because of how just strong it is and how efficiently it can wall break. So yeah, next is Barblast. I think Barblast is more. I don't think it's A minus. I think it'll definitely be A tier. And the reason I put Barblast to A tier is it's basically like a Blowtox, but it's just a lot better. And Blowtox was already very good before this update, but now with Barblast, it becomes even harder to deal with because first off, you have your ability that makes it so explosive moves are boosted in power. So you have like a 30 energy, 90 base power water stab, and like a 100 base power toxic stab. And your ranged attack stat is pretty decent. I think it's about 90. So you're able to get some big damage off, and Luminami can't pivot off on you, and that was one of the like most common ways to actually deal with Blowtox. So switching into this is going to be a huge problem. Not to mention, it still has the same moves that Blowtox did, like Poison, Icicle Trap, things such as that, and of course, Rejuvenate, which is going to be great recovery for it. Poison is a great typing, just like Snaggoob. It's able to remove poison barbs, which is pretty valuable in this meta, especially considering that there's a lot of new barb setters. Well, not too much, but mainly Snaggoob and Lumello. So yeah, some downsides to this. I mean, it doesn't have too many glaring um downsides really. I mean, it's able to threaten so much, but I don't think it'll be quite A tier. It's definitely very good, but I don't think it'll be A plus. But I mean, I never know. Maybe it could be, but I think it's definitely very high A tier. So yeah, I guess the next Lumion I'll go over is Lumello, and I think it's gonna be a solid B tier, B plus tier. Um, Lumello, the reason that you use it is because of barbs. Barbs, it's the only reason you would ever use this thing. You're 100% gonna have it on its moveset. And, I mean, overall, this Lumion, it has some nice qualities. Two of its abilities are pretty good. Sharp Edges makes it so, contact moves, it damages the opponent, which is pretty useful. And it has its secret ability, basically hard counters, Hunder and Garlash, and the Shark too, which is always quite useful because at least two of those are very dangerous Loomians. And Samarine will definitely have a lot more popularity with the update. So, the reason that this isn't any higher is because barbs are really good right now, but the problem is Lumello, it doesn't add anything to them. It's just a hazard stacking bot. Like it doesn't provide much to a team besides barbs, and I feel like if you build around barbs, it might be worth it, but the thing is, I feel like it's not easy to just splash onto a team because because of its defensive, just because it's so defensively lacking. I mean, it doesn't really counter too much, I mean, still a decent Lumion, but you need Amulet on it to have any sort of recovery, or else you're just gonna get worn down very quickly. And yeah, I mean, barbs are definitely worth using, but this Lumion isn't that great on its own, so I think I'll put it in B plus just because of barbs. Yeah. Next is Samarine. I think this is going to be either A minus or B plus. I think that it might be a little better than Lumello, so I think that I might put it in A minus for now, just because the main thing it has going for it is that it's a rev up sweeper, and its coverage is just pretty deadly. I mean, most of like the traditional melee walls can't actually counter this. Like Tundralin gets destroyed by Steel Crusher, Obsidragon does. Luminami gets hit by Thunder Chomp. I mean, I guess Barblast is a decent answer to it now, but it still probably gets hit decently hard by a Thunder Chomp. And I mean, this thing's typing, I don't think it's too great. That's one problem with it, is that defensively, it has a lot of weaknesses, some common things. Kind of like Kinibo. Like it's weak to toxic, um, electric, earth, plant. All those are some pretty big weaknesses, I would say. But I do think that if you build around this thing, the payoff could definitely be worth it. Um, Not to mention, this I don't think this is going to be a very prominent set, but you can always make a very clever um, sort of baffle tank Samarine with terrifying, because it also has that. Once again, I don't think it'll be that great, but I mean, it's an option. Who knows? It might be useful on some sort of team. So yeah, I think that this is probably a solid A minus tier Lumion. Yeah, just its sweeping potential is pretty good. Next up is Sumo Bito, I think. I think I'll probably put it in B tier. This thing, the main problem with it is that its stat distribution isn't that good, because with it being a split evolution from Prope, it's forced into having the same base stat total as Cinemoth, meaning that its stats are going to be relatively low. Not to mention that Brawler Bug isn't that great defensively. I mean, you're weak to things like Air, Toxic, Mind, things like that. But I think there's definitely some reason to use this Lumion, especially with the fact that it has I forgot what the ability was called exactly, but it's essentially parental bond from Pokemon. And if you don't know what that does, it increase it, you hit twice, but the second move that you throw out does 25% damage than what it would normally do. So you essentially hit like 1.25 times stronger, and I think that makes it, and it has a pretty good attack stat too. I believe it's base 110, so that definitely gives it something, and it has some pretty decent moves. Parasitize, just a great bug move. It has Horn Dashi, which is basically driving force. It also has Counter Stance, which is pretty much Sucker Punch, but it's a brawler move, and it also has some other moves for the last slot, like you could run poison, or you could run bulk up. So yeah, this thing could definitely, it could put in work potentially, but I feel like it's definitely held back by sort of middling defensive utility, and even though it can be decent at forcing progress, things like Barblast existing and Snaggoob, which will definitely be very popular, just because of how good they are. I don't think that they'll be too. I don't think Sumo B2 would be that great in this meta. So yeah, B tier Lumion, it's decent, not that great, but yeah. Next up, Benfino. I think that I would probably put in B minus. This thing, it has some pretty good stats. Its offensive stats are above average, but its speed is great. 108 speed, and this thing it isn't too great, but the thing that makes it good is just the sheer amount of options it has. Like it has offensive coverage. It has tsunami, life drain, and frost beam, so it's able to hit offensively. And on the more defensive side of things, it has scapegoat, sap plant, slapdown, and slapdown is normally used as an offensive move, but because this thing's base melee attack is so low, slapdown is really just going to be used for the removing item factor. It also has provoke, and it has photosynthesis, which is just recovery. It's great, and yeah, this thing it doesn't do too much, but I think just the amount of options it has can really help it succeed. And I mean, the one of the biggest problems with it is that its abilities are completely awful. And when I say awful, I mean half of them don't work, and two out of three don't work, and one of them isn't usable in singles. And so yeah, bully, which doesn't work right now, but even if it did, this thing is super short, shorter than things like icicles, so it's pretty much never going to come into play unless you face a secret ability Cosmere, but about three people have that, so that's going to be never. And then there's Sly, which is only 50% working. So how Sly is supposed to work is you ignore the effects of offensive items coming attacking you, and your own attacks ignoring their item. And the only way it works is offensively, so you ignore their items. Um, I don't know. It's just something to do with the coding of the game, but yeah, its abilities are pretty lackluster, and this Lumion it doesn't accomplish too much, but I would say it's decent B minus Lumion just because of the fact of how much options it has really. And lastly, the turtle. I think that this is going to be either a C or a C plus. I feel like C is a bit too harsh, so I think I'll put it in C minus. And this thing, it seems pretty good because it has good stats. High HP, low melee attack, but it has really high defense, high special, high ranged attack, decent range defense, and it has low speed, so it's very tanky. And it has some great abilities too. Tone Deaf, the same ability Mewtwo has, but it can't really abuse it too well because the only sound-based moves it actually has are the typeless moves that Mewtwo has, and obviously typeless moves aren't that great to spam. I mean, the only reason Mewtwo gets around with them is because of how powerful it is, but this doesn't have the same sheer power factor that really pushes it over the edge. And it also has quick recovery, and quick recovery is it's a really good ability. I mean, things like Harpigo and Namore have it, allowing them to absorb status and switch out. And lastly, it has frail armor, which it wouldn't be too useful on this just because of its low speed. But and so with all that, it seems pretty good, right? But the problem is it doesn't really have anything to really go alongside them. I mean, it doesn't have much to abuse tone deaf. I mean, if it had like a sound-based water move or something like that, then hey, that would be really strong. But it can't really use that too well. Frail armor, it's too slow. I mean, maybe if it had shell smash, it'd be able to use that to really bump up its speed. But no shell smash. And then even for quick recovery, I mean, it could be like a bulky sort of just a bulky water that can go full on defensive, recover off hits, pivot out with baffle or whatever. But it doesn't have any of that. Its best recovery move is soft water, and it soft water isn't that great, especially when you look at ventation and how it really struggles with that. And yeah, it's just the problem with it is that it doesn't have its moves don't really match its abilities. And it's kind of a shame because I think this thing has a lot of potential going forward in the future. So, um, Yeah, I definitely think that it's a C plus Lumion, maybe even C, but I think I'm gonna keep it here for now. And yeah, this is my final rankings. Out of these three, in ordered, so I think that Barblast is the best one. The Crab is second, and then Snaggoob is third. But anyways, that's the end of the video. What do you think of this tier list? Do you agree with all the placements? Do you think something deserves to be lower or higher? And yeah, make sure to like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. And I'll see you next time.